This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook, and I'm here with my great friend and colleague, Bec Guild. Bec, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. Another.
Woosah! We made it.
We did. We've got there.
So day 8 of the BioCeuticals 8th Research Symposium. We've just listened to Carrie Jones tying off a lot of loose ends and giving us some great insights into things that I should have been doing for years, but don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what was also on today is the Biocitricles Panel. Now,
yes,
we should point out, we're actually not going to talk about the panel in today's discussion because we're going to leave that surprise for the 8th of July. So make sure that you are an FX Medicine subscriber and you will find out how you can access the replay of the panel between Datise, Carrie, Lara, Amanda, Amy, and you can watch it for yourself. So today, let's just talk about what Carrie covered, which was largely the cortisol awakening response.
That's enough. But it was really interesting. Let me just say about the panel that it's really interesting to see these great minds tete-a-tete and have their different viewpoints and where they meet, where they disagree. It's really interesting. And as I've said before, I think a great conference is where you come away going, you know, I really need to think about that rather than it's done, it's dusted. I totally understand everything.
Yeah,
I really think there's some questions that we need to, you know, revisit at a later stage. Datise, looking at you, I want another podcast.
Or 25, like we're not fussy. Actually, all of them.
Well, I've got to say Lara as well. Lara, I learn every time that woman opens her mouth, I just have aha moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, enough. We're not discussing the panel, we said. So about the difference between a high car and a low car. I mean, we thought we'd be talking about resilience, so we spoke about cars.
Yes, of course, we're not talking about the ones with tyres.
No, but one of the interesting things that struck me right from the very beginning was Carrie's comments about the morning person versus the night owl. And I'm wondering if, you know, is that just how people are? Can people just be like that? Or is that really a sign of, listen, you really need to look at something and balance something out? It's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think the point is that, you know, is it your normal? She did say that, like, if it is your normal, but or is there a change in sort of those fluctuating energy levels? And if there's a change, like if it's how you've been since, you know, the very beginning of time, your time, that is,
and
that is your normal. Maybe you are a night owl, you know, not all of us are morning people. Hello, husband, I know that you would say I'm not a morning person. I'm definitely not the get up, get out of bed, get moving kind of person, but I'm also not the person who needs 48 coffees to get going in the day either. Like, I'm lucky if I have one. So I think my cortisol awakening response is okay.
Yeah, one, maybe two. But I like the taste anyway. The other thing as well that I think needs delving into a little bit further is life stages. I mean, look at teenagers, you know, and early 20s, I might add, having 2 early 20s sons, quite happy. And I remember me, you know, I used to stay up till all hours playing games, talking, partying. I remember coming back from the basement and going straight to a nursing shift. There's no way I'd be able to do that now.
Yeah, but I think as when we are younger, we have a lot more resiliency and coping mechanisms generally. Our cells are younger, our mitochondria are probably a little bit more efficient. You know, there's a lot of compensatory mechanisms at play there. But as we age and our cells fundamentally age and our ability to produce perhaps ATP or to, you know, clear debris from places, like going back to Datise and stuff from yesterday, like all of these things start to add up. And so this is what I like about the cortisol awakening response, because it is a methodology behind perhaps testing for someone's level of resiliency. And I think as well, what I've taken away from Carrie's talk today is just how I love all the way through. She's given incredible analogies. Like, let's just put that out there straight away.
She's really good at analogies.
She's so good. She started off with the trampoline, and then she's gone to her forest analogy. Yep, the boots on the ground is another one. I've actually written a few of them down. A thyroid is a diva, and to use the dark, it's free. So there's just a couple of cool tidbits from today. But where I'm going with this is I really loved that, I think traditionally lots of people would test cortisol in urinary collection and or blood. And what the cortisol awakening response is like a really on the moment kind of look at a salivary level. So she described it as like when we look at the urinary cortisol, it's sort of like you're hovering over the landscape in a helicopter, and you're getting
it's like an HbA1c. It's an average of
you're just kind of getting
the excretion rate,
the feel, the lay of the land. But unless you overlay that with a cortisol awakening response, you can have two quote unquote normal cortisol measurements, and it's not until you look at the cortisol awakening response that you go, hang on, patient A and patient B are and now I have a reason for why I think that their cortisol is problematic, but it's not showing in the test, because the test revealing some of that, as she called it, boots on the ground, underlying pathology, I suppose.
With the animals and the trails and, like the whole landscape right at eye level.
Yeah,
right down.
Shrubbery.
That's what I loved.
Yes. So, and again, I mean, we should really just put out there that Carrie's an exceptional educator. I mean, anyone who can paint a picture and appeal to people's learning on, multiple ways. She had the visual stuff nailed. She had the analogy and the picture and all of that, creating a story, creating really rememberable aspects to the learning. Like, I think she's a very gifted educator. So I'm
but you can also, it's also obvious to me that she's developed these analogies to be able to talk to lay people, her patients.
Yeah.
And so that in a way that they can understand quite a complex scenario.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So I really love
who doesn't follow Carrie on her social media. Actually, I can't speak about what goes through to her Facebook, because I see her constantly on my Instagram, and she puts out the most interesting things. So if you don't follow her, head on over. I think it's Dr. Carrie Jones at Dr. Carrie Jones. She
okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no.
Social media noob here. But like what was another thing that I was thinking of? The hippocampus controls the cortisol awakening response. So what about traumatic brain injury? Which came first, the chicken or the egg here? Which damages which? And I'm just, it'd be very hard to tease that one apart. And, as she really eloquently said, when did things change? When was it different? Let's go back to, as you say, when, you were able to jump on the trampoline and now that trampoline isn't so springy, that sort of.
Or you wet yourself.
Analogy. Yeah. What's another one? One of the things that I still am wondering about is she's talking about a low cortisol awakening response. So basically a flattened car, how people don't have the cortisol and so they may wake up with the sore throats. And I thought, well, hang on, isn't that indicative that the cortisol might have been suppressing something and now is not? And so therefore it's really uncovered an issue. So although it might be bad for you in the long term, at least at this point, it's actually good that you know that there's an issue. Like, let's say you have a propensity for recurrent tonsillitis because of allergies, because of food sensitivities, because of dietary intake, dairy, wheat, whatever. This could be a good little awakening call so that you can now do something about that issue. What about dentition? What about chronic issues that might be causing you heart disease and you never knew it because your cortisol awakening response was handling it? Suddenly you've dropped and it's uncovered an issue that might be actually affecting you systemically. And I think there's some really interesting lessons there. And it's like, when? I've got a lot more thinking to do.
Yeah. And how to recognize the difference between low and high as well. Like, you know.
And the cortisol cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. The what do you call those? Line graphs. They're she just illustrated those so well. But, you know, it's so much crossover actually with Datis from yesterday, but how much risk there is with the cortisol awakening response, just like with blood sugar. And also there's the relationship with cortisol and blood sugar, but that it puts you at risk for hypo and hyperglycemia, pre-diabetes, metabolic disorders, autoimmunity, problems with regulating inflammation. You know, like the list kind of goes on. And that if the cortisol awakening response is flat, as she said, and let's say you're treating it, a cancer patient or someone with sort of more an advanced or chronic disorder, like you really need to pay attention to that. You need to get their sleep hygiene in check. You need to be considering things like boosting their oxytocin, boosting their exposure to light. You know, if they're sitting in front of a computer or in an office with fluorescent lights all day, blue blocking glasses, like there's
Get outside. Get outside.
Yeah, get some sunlight on the skin.
I just wanted to point out, this reason I've kept holding this is listening to Carrie's thing. This is not a coffee, it's a miso. I've been scared off the afternoon coffees now.
Oh, really?
Maybe it's time I change the habit.
Wow, who even are you?
Yeah, I know. Just so enlightened.
Cutting down from 6 coffees to 5. Look at you go.
That's right. Talking about oxytocin, I just laughed. I giggled at her photo of Hank, her dog.
Yeah.
Get a dog.
Congratulations, like your oxytocin just went up.
Kaboom. I mean, she was so funny when she said that. Congratulations. Yeah. But that dog, you know, with the sideline goofy look on its face. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, my heart broke because we've recently lost our dog. But it just gave me such beautiful, fond memories of Snoop, you know, and the love that we gave each other, I guess. But the love that animal was so giving to us humans. Always a wag on his tail. Now we have a cat.
Yeah. Actually, we've joked, haven't we, for years that we need to have a podcast with Dr. Mark Donoghue about, you know, the health benefits of having a pet. Because there are numerous ones, right? Oxytocin's just one example, but
yeah. Digby running into the duck pond. Look that one up on YouTube, everybody.
Yeah, it's
and what was the other interesting thing? The flattened CAR, cortisol awakening response. So forgive us when we say CAR. The flattened CAR and prognostic risk for breast cancer and prostate cancer. That was really interesting for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it ties in for me is chronic stress. So we know that chronic stress gives patients a worse prognosis for any cancer, but specifically in this instance, prostate and breast cancer. And, you know, for instance, metastases, particularly bone metastases, metastasize via a catecholamine signal. So anything and everything that we can do to help manage, obviously you can't get away from that spectre, but to manage that stress of a cancer patient, we need to pull out all stops. You know, so, you know, when Carrie was talking about yoga, meditation, even inversion movements, that was really interesting. I thought, dad dance, anybody? Robotic dad dance? I don't know. But
talking about headstands.
But all of these really, really simple breath moments. You know, just have a breath. Anything that we can do for our patients, we need to pull out all stops.
Yeah. Well, for anyone who's in that more kind of hyper anxiety state as well, they tend to take more shallow breaths in. And so, you know, what you don't realize is it doesn't take very long for that to affect the pH of the system, you know, if you're taking in the shallow breath. So she was saying that there's the the way to intervene in the cortisol awakening response, whether it's low or it's high, is that the strategies you implement have to happen within 30 minutes of waking. So you can see this as being something that, you know, if it's a breath work, or just sitting there before you get up in the morning, before you're thinking about the day, perhaps open your blinds depending on what your cortisol awakening response is doing, but concentrate on getting that breath in and kind of setting up your nervous system for the day. And I think, again, I know I say something about kids every time, it's about part of you know, what I'm interested in, but to teach kids that, like, if you have a child who's perhaps anxious about the day, anxious about going to school, anxious about returning to school after a break because of the coronavirus and what have you, you know, that's something that you can teach them, that they can help to kind of self-soothe or self-reset themselves for the day. So getting up in the morning, opening up the blinds, concentrating on some good breathing techniques. I mean, everyone can do that. It's free.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's a pleasing thing. There's a teacher at my wife's school, and their classes are singing all day.
Fantastic.
Every day. They're singing. It's ABBA, but they're singing.
Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. Everybody turns side on every now and again. Which,
of course, for anyone who hasn't been paying attention all week for the last several weekends, but singing and gargling and things like that stimulate our vagal tone. So it's an important element.
Call out to Emrys Goldsworthy, always.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, there was a couple of other things, and I did want to make another call out, forgive me. And it was when Carrie was talking about her case history with the low car, that guy that had been a high exec working in New York City, loved it for 25 years, and suddenly it's all a drain, that bloke. And
you mean the one who suddenly had to take 50% of the parenting load?
Yeah. Lesson for men, everybody. But it brought home a memory to me of how a naturopath, and I'm going to call out that naturopath, a naturopath helped a colleague of mine go through this period from this vibrant woman, and she really was dragging her feet. And it was Professor Teresa Mitchell-Patterson, looking at you. Thank you so much for your work. Good work. But she had to basically read the Riot Act. And this is exactly what Carrie said. Sometimes you really need to say, you need to change. You really need to change. Or guess what? Somebody really need to lead on this and tell them what's going to happen rather than ask them. It just depends on obviously the personality and where they're at. But he was a person, I guess, given to hardcore decisions. Somebody had to make the decision for him. The other one was the nutrients. And I found this really interesting. I was so glad Carrie mentioned Holy Basil. Professor Mike Cohen and mine's talk, which started as this and ended up with Holy Basil. I love that podcast. It was fantastic. And just so that you know, Mark, if ever you're listening, I have tried twice now to grow Holy Basil and failed miserably. So I need some pointers.
Oh, you're not giving it I also thought it was interesting, which I didn't know, but that Holy Basil can be beneficial if as an antihistamine as well, which, you know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. So again, it's one of those herbs that tends to get pigeonholed. You know, it's great for immunity, it's great for stress. It's, you know, this wonderful adaptogen, but it's got that immune sideline thing. So it's a really good little herb to throw in, particularly when you have a chronic or a more chronic condition. And please don't take that as a contraindication to acute. I don't believe in that. What was the other one? The cortisol cliff.
In low carb?
Something I missed was the how does excessive cortisol affect serotonin? And Carrie had a diagram with the what is it?
Negative
indoloamine? No, IDO and TDO, and I didn't catch it. It was gone. So I need to revisit that one. I didn't get a screen grab.
Oh, did you?
Like, no, missed it.
Sometimes though, just to take your attention off to screen grab so you can remember later. I don't do it. I lose my concentration, so I just keep going.
Yeah. What is it? Command Shift 3 on a MacBook.
Yeah.
It just takes everything. Gets everything.
Some of the drug interactions were pretty interesting, like aspirin at high doses, so not low dose aspirin, you know,
Got to look into that one.
Can suppress ACTH and therefore have an impact on cortisol. Opioids, be they legal or illegal, obviously has an impact on depressing the cortisol awakening response. And Accutane, well, the vitamin A.
Yes, Accutane. Never knew about that one.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's often given to teenagers, so it's not really a time of their life you want to be influencing their cortisol awakening response. So that's interesting.
No, but I'm actually going to look into that because of a more rare side effect of Roaccutane with mood. So I don't know about that. I'll tell you a drug I am definitely going to look into about this cortisol awakening response and potential influences on cortisol. And that's Montelukast, which has now, so it's a tablet for asthma, severe asthma.
Oh.
And there's been some extremely severe side effects, suicidal ideation. I can't remember a case of actual suicide, but there has been in Australia definitely instances of suicidal ideation.
Yeah, right.
From an asthma drug.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to be looking into that.
Hard to give the argument that the benefit outweighs the risk there, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Yeah, don't get me started on that one.
No,
and one of the other
let's keep talking about Carrie.
One of the other key things, though, was these really simple things that we really need to do. And I've learnt this from Lise Alschler, and that is gratitude and joy. Find joy. Find play.
Journaling was another one she wrote down.
Yeah, journaling. Well, we know the benefits of journaling with cancer patients. But finding a joy and gratitude is an interesting thing. So
actually, Dr. Michael Murray talked a lot about gratitude in some of his plenary lectures from one of the old symposiums.
The second symposium, yeah.
Second, third, maybe? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But, you know, way back we're talking. So even back then he was presenting like a really compelling and scientifically validated case for gratitude, which is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important stuff. So, what was there another one? Oh, the interesting thing about the guy, I think it was the same case history with the extreme fatigue late at night. He had energy late at night. That was that guy. And he was refusing to use his CPAP machine. And I think it's really interesting about, you know, we tend to like the therapies to be all natural, but I think, you know, we need to realize that if somebody's got sleep apnea, that's a killer. So obviously we need to work on things like, you know, weight loss, weight management, stress, all of those sort of issues. But for goodness sake, like if somebody's got an old CPAP machine where they look like a gas mask on your face, now the developments in that area is incredible. Yeah. They're now the softest rubber, and it almost reminds me of the door trim of some cars. Right. It's quite a soft, bouncy rubber. Yeah. So get them to re-investigate those sort of issues, particularly if they're potentially lethal issues.
Yeah, sleep apnea, much like something I said yesterday was a trigger word. I said bioinositol was a trigger word. Just sort of one of those things that keeps coming up. I feel like sleep apnea just keeps coming up and keeps coming up and keeps coming up. And it's so hard. I don't know what you think if you've looked into any of the, you know, evidence around it. A lot of it's around like just the machines and equipment, not really a lot around kind of, you know, some of these potential underlying causative factors, which if we look at it, and yeah, again, it's something we need to delve into. Hands up if you're an expert out there, anyone, but I'm going to assume that there's a microbiome element to it. I'm going to assume that perhaps there's some nutrient deficiencies. Maybe there's some pathway issues that we need to be investigating, but it just seems to me like one of those things that all of a sudden there's so many people being identified with it, but why? Like nobody's really looking at what are some of these common factors. I mean, aside from, we know about weight gain or even people with diabetes and things like that, but sometimes people have got it and they're not they're not an obvious kind of metabolic syndrome type case. So
no,
a very hugely emerging clinical area, somewhere where I think we definitely need some expertise on where we can help as a functional therapist, like functional medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a last little point, one point that I forgot before, and that was the first case history, I think, with the woman who ate very healthy and she worked in a clothing
apparel,
an apparel sporting apparel business. And she had this anticipatory stress. That was something very interesting to me. And
so elevated CAR, where the cortisol on waking is high, but then instead of naturally kind of having that rhythm where it
petering off, she just kept going high,
going up for up to 3 measurements, like for up to the 60-minute mark, and then by the afternoon it's almost flatlined. So they're up, they're out of bed, and they're kind of running on the hamster wheel. And then by the afternoon, they're so exhausted they can barely drag themselves around and function.
Yeah, so. And you would not know that unless you did a CAR. You would not know that.
Now that I know what they are, I'll be like, oh.
No, but you wouldn't. Yeah, okay, we'll pick it now, but you wouldn't be able to confirm it. How's that?
Yeah,
without doing a CAR. Because if you did a serum cortisol test, that's one test from when. If you did a urinary cortisol test, that's this
curve,
sort of
the biorhythmic kind of curve
reading. Yeah. So we really need that, not a 4-point collection, but this very short 3 or 4 points in the morning.
Yeah, it was
straight away.
3 points.
3.
Like on waking, 5 minutes after, 30 minutes after, and 60 minutes after, and then again in the afternoon, again at bedtime. Those are the markers?
Well, so the CAR is the on waking 30 minutes and 60 minutes, so 3 readings. But then you do 2 more just to see the end of the day plateauing, but they're not part of the CAR. The CAR is this 3-point test. Yeah. So just really interesting things that you can pull out. But again, it comes back to patient history, questioning them, getting into their heads. When did this happen? What's important for you? All of this sort of general care, patient care that we should all be doing every single time. So often we go, what are you here for? A sore toe. Okay.
Another thing I really sort of took away as evidenced by all the things I've written down, but unlike so many of our other sessions, which have been so dominated by pathways and genes and SNPs and things that are all completely reliant upon some really key nutrients that have to drive those pathways, when we're dealing with the cortisol awakening response, probably around 80% of some of the interventional strategies are herbal medicine. That's where herbal medicine really shines.
And greater than 50% of resolution of CAR issues can be gotten by addressing proper, restful sleep.
Definitely.
Good night. Good night.
On that note,
I think we're done. I mean, this was such a great symposium, I've got to say. As a wrap-up, like there was times when, talk about a cortisol awakening response, jeepers with the tease. Get ready. Amanda was the heart. I love listening to Amanda. I love the way that she says amp up. I've just fallen in love with her. It's like a Boston accent. Lara just makes me wake up. I feel, I don't think of myself as a misogynistic, but I feel myself being I just think I've gotten things so wrong on so many occasions. And I'm so thankful for Lara. Well, waking me up and just going, you got to change your vernacular here,
Yeah.
Talking to me.
Yeah. Imagine how much fun we would have had if we were all in the flesh, though, as well. Kind of feel a little bit.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Less coffee, more alcohol. No.
Longer days. Yeah, less sleep.
And some great food, some great tete-a-tetes. But I miss everybody that, I usually see at the FX Medicine podium or stage at the symposiums.
Yes,
and, Beck and I love seeing everybody catching up.
Thanks for putting up with me. I know I'm not as fancy as, you know, all the guests you would normally talk to. But
you are an incredibly brainy person, Bec. Don't you dare underestimate yourself. I rely on you for so much. And I love your organisational capabilities, not the least.
Okay. Well,
love your work, Bec.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope we didn't give too much away, and that you've all enjoyed your time watching the symposium for yourself, or if you've been watching along with our videos, remember we'll throw the link in about where to find it, and just mark it down in the calendar that FX Medicine will share the replay of today's panel on the 8th of July. So we'll pop that into our Facebook, and it'll come out in our newsletter. So make sure you're a subscriber.
Look forward to that one. Thanks, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the symposium. If you haven't, you know, I guess there's still the chance to purchase it and learn a hell of a lot.
Yeah, you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, looking forward to 2021 too now.
Yes, in Melbourne. Have we shared those dates? I don't think we have.
I don't think we have.
No, I didn't. The 22nd to the 24th of April, I believe, and it's going to be in Melbourne. Do you want me to double check that? Yep, 22nd to the 24th of April, 2021. And it'll be in Melbourne. Forgive me, I forget exactly where.
I love Melbourne. I think it was the Hyatt.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Looking forward to seeing everybody there. Please, please, can we see everybody there? Bec, thanks for joining us. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on FX Medicine. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.